and welcome back to the Focused on Infinity podcast with Logan Grendel. I am Logan Grendel. It's been a while, hasn't it? But let's not worry about that. I'm here today with an excellent guest who I've been following and enjoying content of, and it is Evie of Chill Polyamory.
Hello.
Hi. Today we're going to talk about politics and polyamory, and also I just kind of wanted to start right in by addressing the elephant in the room, and that is the fires that are happening in LA right now. And even before we introduce ourselves and all that, I just kind of wanted to take a minute and address that, and also give you, Evie, a chance to say what you are thinking and or feeling about everything that's happening.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm enraged and heartbroken. And I feel like I would just love to go a period of time without feeling enraged and or heartbroken. So I'm there. And I think also on a personal level, I've had a house fire, I've had a house burn down.
Wow.
I'm relating so hard to people. Yeah. And I had neighbors to go to who still had their homes. So just the scale of it is so intense, of just entire communities just having nowhere, and having to start over. And yeah. So even if people are materially safe, if they have backup plans, if they have places they can go, which not everyone does, but even if that's the case, it's just traumatic to lose everything you had just overnight. And just the way that it happened, to be all of a sudden out of nowhere. I still sort of think with that in mind, because that similarly happened to my home when it burned down. It was just up in flames in 15 minutes and everything gone. And so then you just sort of watch your back for the rest of your life of it could all be gone at any time. And while I think that's a valuable survival skill to not get too attached to material things, and to always expect the unexpected, it's traumatic. And so my heart breaks for everyone who's experiencing that right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's wild that is I'm sure that is bringing up lots of personal stuff for you as well, for something that you've gone through. And I'm a big picture girly. So I'm with a zoom. What I'm thinking right now is that's even not, my brain was in a totally different place with it, because I'm looking at this as a black swan event. Because, I mean, I don't see any way that LA becomes anything like it was following this, because it's not totally over, even the acute moment of it. And with all disasters, when they don't happen to you, you have the news cycle, and then you have it's over and you forget about it and you move on to the next thing. But when you're talking about a disaster of this magnitude, it's always just the beginning for the people who are experiencing it. And of course, the poorest will get it the worst. That's just always how it goes. And it's how it's going to be here, because, now, of course, that doesn't mean I don't have empathy for people who have money, because I'm the kind of person that, unless you're nesting yacht Elon Musk wealthy, you're not necessarily the wealthy that people are talking about, right? You're making $200,000 a year in this world, in America, doesn't make you rich beyond measure, actually, right? Because also there is an increase of expenses and stuff. So it's and I just feel it's really important that people think about, when we talk about the wealthy, we're not really talking about the rich. Rich people are fine. Whatever, it's fine. But wealthy, that's the problem. And why I think this will be a black swan event is because LA is one of the hearts of this country. So all the people who've had to leave, all the things that have been destroyed, all, culturally, physically, financially, the city's going to have to reshape itself. And what that looks like, we can't say. And so many other things are already broken or actively collapsing as we speak. So I don't see how we're going to put that back together, especially with the transition of governments into one which is even less interested in doing anything to protect people. So like, I just don't see a way of coming back from this. And also, given that what the incoming administration wants to do is destroy the administrative state, an event like this is actually great because they view places like California, period, as antagonistic to their goals. So I don't think they're going to help. So it's like the disaster is... I'm always looking into the future. You know, I'm an Aquarius rising. I'm thinking, I can't help but live in the future. So like, I'm seeing where this is going to go. And I'm like, y'all, we need to start thinking more broadly about this. And it's also a reminder, we'll get to this when we talk about the organizing stuff, but people will tell you, organize locally, and that online organizing or that more distant localizing doesn't count. That is in the world that we live in now. And in the acute moment of climate collapse that we're living in now, absolutely the wrong headed. It's not the way to go, because you don't know, you might have to leave where you are. So you got to know people in every place. Like, definitely got to have local taken care of, but also knowing people who live elsewhere is always going to be good, just even for more perspective on what you're experiencing. But my heart does go out to each individual, you know, who's dealing with this, because I can't even imagine, I can't even imagine. And it's, we need each other right now, and compassion is really, really the move. So, just wanted to kind of, I don't know, touch on that a little bit. Thank you for sharing that was something that, you have like intimate experience with.
Yeah. Thanks for leading with that, because it is on my mind and it's on your mind. I imagine people watching it's on their mind. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, now that we've done that, let's introduce our guest. Actually, I'll just let you introduce yourself. Tell us whatever you would like us to know about you.
Sure. I'm Genevieve, and my handles on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube are chill polyamory. And essentially, it started as a headline thought: I make education and resources, and I offer peer support for non-monogamy and polyamory, specifically with like a leftist point of view, centered on like a relationship anarchist approach, anti-hierarchical approach. However, I'm happy to help whoever would like, some support, especially if you don't have people in your life who get it. So that's where I'm at now. The account started during 2020 when I just was like indoors and started posting about life. And so it sort of organically grew from there. But yeah, I wanted to, the reason it's named that is like, I was like, I don't know, my life is kind of boring. Everyone here heard polyamory, especially then, and was like, ooh, scandalous, and I was just like, I don't know, I'm kind of boring, I'm kind of a homebody. It's like, and so I kind of thought that it would be nice to talk about how maintenance and how you can have, like, I think boring polyamory is such an ideal for so many people. Like, oh, I would love to not have highs and lows, so that's essentially it, is like that there can be relaxed polyamory. So I offer tools and resources to the best of my ability.
I'm glad for that context about the name of it, because absolutely, I don't know if I mentioned this when we were like chatted briefly last time, but I'm working on this piece called A Love Like the Sun, where it's about like not the sun for the brilliance and the big, the ebullience of the sun, but for the constancy of it. But for, every day, the sun is going to come up and go down. And that is, to me, what like relationships are actually built on. Whatever the kind of relationship, it's like the highs and lows, they do come, especially with non-monogamy, but they also do come with monogamy. So like, what I think like building healthy relationships is indeed about like seeking the boring I guess, like the point where it's just like, no, this is good and it works and it feels good. And, it's not like everyday damage report. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that perspective, and I have enjoyed, your takes on stuff for a while for that particular reason.
So glad. Yeah.
To introduce myself briefly for those of you who are new, if you are new, welcome, and if you are not new, welcome back. I'm Logan Grendel, and I do a lot of things. I am a non-binary leftist, which I have a dog training and walking business where it's mostly about training humans, actually. I am also a non-monogamous person, but I also generally tend to, it looks, a lot of the time it looks fairly monogamous because, I do have a heart that plays favorites. We'll talk about how hierarchy shows up in ways, and that's actually a good place to start. Actually, you know what? I'll start with this. What would be, for someone who is not non-monogamous, who doesn't practice polyamory, but is interested or is just like, why would one do that? What would be kind of like your elevator pitch as to why a relationship anarchy or non-monogamous framework is a better one, in your opinion?
Well, if people don't want it and don't understand it and are disinterested in it, then great. Then it's not for you, So I'm not really in the camp of like seeing one relationship structure as superior, but rather like it fits some of us. And I remember being attempting monogamy because that was the only path shown. I hated it. I was like, I'm either going to cheat or be cheated on. I was very nihilistic about it. So if anyone relates to that, there are other ways to go about structuring your relationships. So it's really, And I think how we love people and how we form our relationships is how we act out in the world too. Like the personal being political, which is essentially the premise of this talk today. So that is what we wind up getting into when we talk about building a relationship. But you can absolutely be monogamous as well and still be doing the work. So I think it's just about like, who are you? How do you love? And if you feel like the current system or the current role models you've been given don't work, there are alternatives. And increasingly, we are more and more visible for that reason.
That's awesome. Thank you. Right. I guess I was kind of assuming that if somebody is asking, they're already interested. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like one of my friends, tangentially but related. They're like, one of the keys to knowing that like there might be something going on with your gender or your neurodiversity or whatever is, are you always looking up information about it? Because that means that something in you is looking for answers about it, which means there's something there, right? It's like, if you don't have questions about it, then that's actually the indication, but once you start asking, then maybe you should, explore a little bit. I have a similar, like for me, non-monogamy shows up in that, like, I feel like having a framework that is not expansive or that doesn't allow questioning is, for me, more of the reason that I am a non-monogamous person. It's not even about what I intend to do necessarily. It's more about the way that things can be approached, Whereas like in monogamous relationships where like saying to some people that you are attracted to someone else or that you experience attraction outside of them, that's already a hard no. And I'm like, that means I can't even be honest with you. That's weird to me. So it's like more about, it's not, for me, it's not like, and I have, without getting too deep into some of that, I used to be very polyamorous and like in like play parties and doing lots of like kink parties and even like hosting play and kink parties for a while and that kind of thing. And in the end, I discovered that was like too much for me like ideologically, I'm like, yes, absolutely do it. But then for me personally, I was like, this is too much. Like this is too much Google calendaring, and I can't do it. But then like finding where it fit for me, and then being able to be like explain that to other people, or like talk about both ends of it to other people, has been like really interesting. I'm curious, like what, like for you, what brought you to being, non-monogamous? Was it like a particular experience? Was it like, or was it just, like you said before, like, it just wasn't working. And so you were looking for another framework.
Yeah. I mean, when I heard the word, I was like, that's it. That's me. Like, I just hadn't heard the word. And so it was like in 2012 or so. And I had a couple of long-term monogamous attempts of being deeply in love, and also feeling like, I don't know, pessimistic about it. Just some aspect of me. And maybe it was because I grew up seeing a lot of monogamy not work, and having a lot of examples of like, why did you try to do that to each other? Like both of you were frustrating each other the whole time. And seeing some of those same people, like my parents, marrying and divorcing like 3 times each, and then like having step parents in the mix and stuff. But then they would still be around. They would have found a new shape that works. My mom and my dad were like friends towards the end, and that was a better distance. That was a more sustainable distance. And so I think without having the language for it, I also saw people restructure to a relationship they could do long term, And so I think, I was like very conscious that trying to force a connection into a box. I love you, therefore we got to do this. We got to move in and have kids, and maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we would hate each other if we tried that, And so I was already kind of conscious of that and stressed. I was very stressed in monogamy. And ultimately, that distress was what led to like the end of my romantic relationships. But so I was single when I heard the word polyamory, and I went to a polyamory meetup, and I was just like, oh, okay. So this is an option. I want to know everything I can about it. And it's taken a lot of different shapes. It's evolved over time. I've had a lot of trauma to work through. I think it will bring everything to the surface that you can't avoid dealing with, especially in the beginning. Maybe you can skate by not dealing with your trauma if you're in monogamy, but in polyamory, like, no. It's time. So, and to your point of like that feeling of overwhelm, of like, this is too much. I also validate that in people, because I'm like, sometimes you want something more expansive, and it's work, and it's time, and it's hours long conversations sometimes in the beginning, and it's processing trauma. And like, if you don't have the hours in the day, if you got a couple of jobs and a few kids, and like, if you got to prioritize. And so I've had people tell me like, I want this. And I literally, I don't have the bandwidth. I'm like, valid, So like, but I think I was about polyamorous for 6 years before I started being open publicly about it. And that's really the time that I was like, I think I might have something to give back. So it took some time, not to doom and gloom anybody that it's going to take 6 years, but just like, that was when I felt a little bit of internal security of like, okay, I have something to offer, and some hope. Because at that point, it was very balanced and routine and predictable, and in a way that was also still left space for spontaneity and a mutual attraction with other people. And like, so I didn't feel trapped anymore. And that's really, I think, what polyamory has given me at the end of the day.
That's a really great perspective. I definitely feel that. My own experience has been somewhat similar. I was in a monogamous relationship for 13 years, but it was like not like, even looking back, like we didn't have the language for it and didn't like do it well. But like a lot of it was, for me, it's really like all relationships and the way that we look at things politically, socially, like to relate it to like gender briefly. I am non-binary largely because I don't believe that gender exists, period. Right. So like clearly, and like also I was just raised by all femmes, and so like I don't know, there's just some parts of it where it's just like I'm just acknowledging what is there. Like I don't know how to do a lot of the dude things. Like why would, you know? So, and also in relationships, like when you were talking about watching your parents' relationship shift, that right there to me is like the beating heart of relationship anarchy, which is like, we're not even saying, you know, because a lot of people, especially when I was 2012, that was the year, actually. A lot of my friends and I called 2012 and 2013 affectionately the great sluttening, because like it was, everybody I knew was super expanding, you know, their understanding of relationships and sexuality and like, you know, all that. It was wildly a really big time for that. Maybe the Mayans were onto something. Anyway, that's not the point. Acknowledging what a relationship is and is not. Just and being honest about it, right? Like one of the things that I say to people, and then I said to my long-term ex, I was like, you are so important to me that I want you to be in my life forever. And if we keep trying to do a monogamous relationship, like out of the book, that's not gonna be possible, you know? And so the only way to honor this relationship is to end it in the format it's in now, and then figure out what works, you know, later. And I think that's, what would you say are, what's the difference between relationship anarchy, polyamory? You want to give people like a little bit of a little quick primer on what all of that's about?
Yeah. So if relationship anarchy is a new term for anyone, essentially it's pulled from like political anarchistic thinking, which is dissolution of the state, and every community gets to decide what works for it and be self-governing. And so we apply that to the individual relationships too, which means there's no should. There's no must. There's no pre-made social script. You know, obviously we have our, you know, hardwiring and everything that we don't exist in a vacuum, but the intention is to let go of any shoulds or musts or assumptions. And everybody involved in a dynamic gets to decide what that dynamic looks like. And specifically, it is anti-hierarchical in the sense that we are not putting romance above friendship. That we're not assuming that one type of relationship is inherently more valuable or should be default to priority. But as well, we're not letting other people dictate the terms of a relationship they're not in. So anti-hierarchy is like nobody outside of this dynamic is setting the terms for this, right? And so and everybody gets included in decisions that affect them, essentially. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. And the reason that it's not synonymous with polyamory, or you can't assume that, is because a monogamous person could absolutely practice relationship anarchy, you know, putting community over the individual, having those same priorities in that same praxis, because just because they only want to bring one person close to them in some type of way, if that's what they want, you know, there's a book called Relationship Anarchy. I've got it handy, by Juan Carlos Perez Cortez. It talks about the difference between compulsory monogamy and freely chosen monogamy. So if you're doing it on autopilot, or if you're doing it from social pressure or because of whatever other reasons, then I have it. This is, I've thought of everything, and this is just what's organic. If you're doing it because it's organic, great. Then you can absolutely be a monogamous relationship anarchist. So yeah, there's overlap in the Venn diagram, but they're not synonyms.
That's really cool. And so I've been calling it obligate monogamy, but that what was the term that
compulsory
monogamy. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, because I do feel like and there are some, you know, I would say that I definitely resonate more with relationship anarchy than I do with polyamory, because for a lot of reasons, but yeah, for the things that you say, like there should be no prescription for what relationships need to look like, and to actually deal with them as they are. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I should add that this is also viewing it through like a Western lens, that I had a conversation with two women in India who were talking about, in their community, there's the default, the autopilot is you do everything for your family. You don't make decisions for yourself. There's individualism is actually, kind of radical. And so they were saying that like their rebalancing of the scales was to be a little bit more thinking of like, I'm going to do things for myself, and so relationship anarchy, I think, is also context dependent of like, but in general is the same premise of you're rejecting social scripts of other people and outside entities and tradition telling you how it should be, and you get to decide, and whoever you love gets to decide how it's going to be.
That's really important to put in there. Yeah, the like it being contextual and depending on like where everyone's coming from. It's been that's been a thing that comes up in my experiences has also been just like cultural, racial, class, like all this sort of stuff where, one of the pushbacks that I heard on just like non-monogamy, polyamory from some people was that like, they're like, I can't even afford that. Like, I don't have the time. Like, I've just got to make money and feed myself and my family. And like, I can't even think about like what my heart wants or like or go on, like spend the time getting to know people and all that sort of thing. And I mean, we as Americans, Westerners, I should say, could definitely use a lot more thinking about the collective in all of that. Because a thing that I think, and it's funny because I feel like in even the default world, in like the compulsory monogamous world, there are some things and some descriptions of stuff and some frameworks which already naturally play to like the truth of relationship anarchy. Like people say things like, oh yeah, my work wife or my work husband. Okay, so you're acknowledging that you have a special relationship with this person, but like because you don't like go on dates with them or fuck them, like it's no big deal. And like monogamous people are like fine with it. And I'm like, you're already doing it, babe. You're already doing it. You're literally doing it. Or where it's like, is your monogamous partner your best friend, or do you also have a best friend that you spend all your time with? Even people who don't like claim, who like would be like, oh, no, relationship anarchy is not for me. Because I mean, and to be fair, I have seen some like toxic expressions of polyamory where it's kind of like I was kind of chastised by a partner for being like, I have really strong feelings towards this new person and I like want to spend more time with them. And like, I feel like I have to phone it in with my other partners right now because that's where my attention is. And like, and to them, that was a bridge too far because they were like, well, that means that relationship is changing our relationship. And I was like, well, that happens. Like, and it's like, if it was the way that I kind of think about it is if when a person gets a new job, that means that they have to work more hours, that they don't have so much time to spend with you or whatever. Like it sucks, but most people can be like, yeah, well, that's how it goes with work. But when it's like another person, it's harder because of a lot of that like programming around like, and I believe jealousy is as valid an emotion as any other. That is, and I disagree, and some people disagree, but like for me, it's like, it's all about what you do with it, how you express it, what you like, and how you go at other people about it, and the entitlement with which you deal with jealousy than like the feeling itself. Because the feeling is just a feeling to me. I'm curious on as to your take on it, but I feel like for me, it's everything, basically everything, especially right now in this like rapidly dying world. I'm like, I have no time for anything that isn't authentic. I want to tell people what I'm actually thinking, what I'm actually feeling, and then we can talk about it. We can like work through it, or maybe we can't work through it. That's not great, but that's also okay. And I don't know, a little bit of a ramble, but like, I'm just curious what your thoughts on that sort of thing. Like, what do you think about jealousy? How do you counsel people about jealousy and things like that? Because that's, to me, one of the first things that make people say like, it's not for me. I couldn't do any of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to get back to your anecdote in a moment, but I mean, to answer your question, I see jealousy as a bit of an umbrella term that we use too broadly, in my opinion. Because I've seen jealousy actually be fear or anxiety or grief or anger or insecurity. I've seen people feel envy or FOMO. Like there's different degrees and there's different like drivers. And if we call it all one thing, then it can become a little bit overwhelming. People just say, I feel jealous. I don't know what to do about it. But if we get like a little bit more specific of like, well, what is it? Like play the thought all the way through. Cause now I know a little bit more. Oh, you're feeling envious. You want that for yourself. Well, now I know that I've not done something to you, that you're just, realizing something you're wanting in your life, versus if I have now, neglected you, and not communicated great, and you're feeling like lonely or angry. Well, now I know my role in this conversation is to maybe reflect on what I did and how can I make it right. And so, yeah, I think jealousy, my questions are always trying to like name it a bit more precisely, because then it becomes a little more doable, like a little more actionable, of what to do about it.
Yeah. You know what? That's a good way to look at it. I definitely do make a distinction between jealousy and envy, but because like those two, I feel like that's definitely a big one where like you really got to like separate those two out. But if you're connecting jealousy to like all the other, so it seems like you're connecting jealousy to like jealousy is kind of like an umbrella, and there's different things which get to that like feeling. So like you're saying to like parse out what it actually is important.
Put more words to it. Is it a fear? Is it an insecurity? Is it like, I want this with you? I want more time with you. Is it that? And so it's actually a talk about our relationship, not about what you're doing with someone else. I just realized I want more time with you. Or is it like, I don't like that you spoke about that person and how hot they are, and I feel insecure, and now I'm thinking that you're comparing me to them. And so there's usually more like to it, and it can make it feel a lot like less overwhelming to understand it a bit better, and to like for our partners to feel equipped on what to do about it, or like, do they just listen and hold space, or do they need to alter their behavior or whatever, So I see it as a collaborative team effort. Some people think that like you're better at polyamory if you never feel it, and I'm like, that's weird. That's like it's a set of human emotions. It's a set of human emotions. It's just information. It's just trying to tell you something. So what's it trying to tell you? And if we stigmatize it and say you're bad if you feel this, then nobody's going to talk it. It just drives it underground. So I don't think that that's really helpful.
That's real. That is one of the reasons that like I've gone back and forth on like, with non-monogamy, polyamory, relationship anarchy, is because like it, in the like play party scene in the city, I'm just going to keep it a stack. Like rich, white, cis het men ruin everything. It's just because it's kind of like they discovered polyamory, and it became, for a lot of them, not all of them, but for a lot of them, basically they just wanted more sexual partners. And like it wasn't about the relationships. It wasn't about the closeness, the sharing, the connection. And don't get me wrong. Look, if you want to just have a bunch of sexual partners, that's great too. But just say that, it's like, to me, it's just all about being honest about what really is, what you really want from any relationship, from anyone. And like, like demonizing jealousy. For me, jealousy is like, it's like pain or something, right? Like, okay, well, why are you hurting? Like that's really the question. Yeah, totally. And like, but also, not for nothing, not only just not to demonize jealousy, but understand that the negative emotions are the ones that keep you alive. They're the ones that tell you, it's like if you didn't experience pain, we would all croak out all the time. You wouldn't know that you had a nail stuck through your foot. So like, not only not demonizing, stigmatizing the negative emotions, but actually honoring them and giving them their due, essentially, for being a vital part of how we regulate and co-regulate and actually understand the world around us genuinely.
Yeah, I definitely am a fan of not calling emotions good or bad. Maybe you like how it feels, or maybe you hate how it feels, but like there's not an objective good and bad. Like a vice feels great and can ruin your life. Drugs feel great, and for some people they ruin their life. And like, processing trauma sucks and it hurts, and it can be like the pain that's necessary for growth and for healing, So like, I think all of the emotions are like serving a purpose, and we get to parse out what is trying to do for us. And I've definitely had to say no to some good feelings because I'm like, that's going to lead me down a wrong path. Like, I would love to, but that's going to be a mess later. Like, so, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Oh,
I was curious. You mentioned earlier something about, so you were saying that you were describing like wanting to spend more time with someone and telling your other partner that. You mentioned the term entitlement in relation to jealousy. Was that person like feeling entitled to your time, or what did you mean?
Yes. Where it was like, well, because we are polyamorous, you're not supposed to change how much time you spend with your existing partners because of new partners. And it was kind of like, I believe in acknowledging where hierarchy exists, not prescriptively, but descriptively. Like saying that someone is my best friend does not inherently mean that like if another friend is in trouble that I'm going to ignore them. I'm like it's kind of like I want to give people their actual due for who they are and what they mean to me, but it's like literally for me a description of what that relationship is, and it's not like I'm not going to treat them a certain way because they have this title. I'm going to treat them that, like, I gave them the title because I treat them that way. And like, it just kind of is like a shorthand. So it's one of like, I believe that there is love may be infinite. Time is not infinite. And so, the people with whom you spend like the most time, you just have more time to develop closeness with them. So like, I'm wondering, and in this case, this was a person who was not a relationship anarchist, but a non-hierarchical polyamorous person, like heavy on the non-hierarchy, meaning that like, for them, it was very important to have all relationships be equal in a way that, and one of the things that like, ended the relationship is that fundamentally doesn't make sense to me. Every relationship is different. Like they are in a very, in a sort of like esoteric sense, I view all people as equal, but it's ideological. That's not, that's like, it's an idea. That's not practical. And it's aspirational, but it's also not practical. And also it's disrespectful to me in some ways to be like, oh yes, this person that I just met is just as important and deserves just as much XYZ as someone that I have been working with and loving and you know, processing with for like 10 years, right? There, and it's like, there's got to be, you know, how do you navigate the, you know, that sort of dichotomy between not wanting to make some people feel or actively be less important and still honoring the people who carry the most weight, for lack of a better term, in your life?
Yeah, I mean, a common misunderstanding of challenging hierarchy is the thought that everyone should get all the same stuff. And the thing is a person is not a resource to be split up evenly, you know? And how I lay it out, I'm like, and I'm like, you know, it's often leftists saying this, you know, I'm like, if a government gives a lot of resources over here and no resources over there, I'd say that is unjust. Let's look at it. But we're talking about a person, not an institution. Yeah. And so you're allowed to like have a say in where you go and what you want to do. And wanting different things is not inherently harm, you know? Like, I do support people asking, why do I want what I want? Am I on autopilot? Am I, like, sometimes people will experience, you know, being the hidden partner, being someone that they don't want to present to the world, or, you know, like, there are biases and prejudices and stuff that can, you know, get wrapped up in that. So I'm all for, I wonder why I don't want the same stuff with you. You know, is it this? Is it something inside? Is it outside? You know, is it logistically, I might lose my job if I post you on social media. So I'm not gonna, you know, my wife's already there. I'm gonna. So asking why, but it's.
Can I pop in for 1 second?
Of course.
That is super important. And I need white people who are in relationship with people of color to be double, triple, quadruple sure that you are not doing that to people of color in your life, because it is, and let me say this compassionately, if you have a racist ass family, it's going to be more difficult for you to want to integrate people of color into your life. That's your work. That's your work. That is your work. That is your work of cycle breaking. That is your work in relationship. That is your work. If you want to actually be in relationship with people of color and honor those relationships and not fetishize us, you have to be willing to confront white supremacy in your own life, or you're just not going to be a good partner. It just, period. And it's like one of those things where, like you said, to explore it and to examine it, vital, because I think a lot of it happens I mean, as a person who is like non-binary and Black and a leftist and a witch, like, you know, great relationships with people, but often, you know, they would sort of subtly sideline me in some ways because they're like, even if they're there, you know, even if they're there, they know that people around them aren't. So they're like, and they haven't actually addressed it in themselves, you know. They're like, well, I'm good and I know that I, you know, do all this stuff, but I can't change the world. Okay, well, then you can't date me. Bye.
Yeah.
Not the whole world, just your world.
It's why the challenge of you want this with them and not with me, that's unjust. I don't always like, I want to know more. Why do you think it's unjust? Because you might actually be onto something. You might actually be onto something that is like bigger, that is emblematic of some disrespect, of a pattern of behavior that at the very least doesn't work for you, but it could be a pattern of behavior of harm, right? Like, so sometimes people bring it up of that's not fair as a way to say like, there's something bigger here. However, going back to like, if you've done that examining, you're like, it's just not organic. I don't want to be with you 3 days and them 3 days. I want to be with them 5 days. Yes. I want to be with you 1 day. That feels organic, because otherwise this feels forced. And I don't think the answer is to force a relationship into a shape. that just for like, you know, the optics of it. Because again, if we're like anarchistic or at least anti-hierarchical, we're like, we don't want outside pressures self-imposed, you know, imposed onto it. And so everybody in the relationship gets to decide what it looks like. And if you want different things, then that could be disappointing. That could be painful. But the politics of it sometimes gets leveraged in a way to like bypass the grief or the sadness or the disappointment or the distance, or I'm grieving that you don't want the same thing as me. That happens in monogamy too. It's not unjust to break up with someone or take a job where you're busy all the time, you know, and like in the same way, if you just don't want to see them as often, we're allowed to have asymmetry. And I don't think that's always inherently like injustice, you know?
I would say the opposite. In fact, you know, it's things being equal, you know, giving me $5 and giving Elon Musk $5 is not the same thing, you know, even if it's, you know, it's about equity. It's about giving people what they need, what works for them, what is good for them, what speaks to them. Like, you know, it's like the from each to each of it all, right? It's very much, that's very much what it's about. And a lot of people, I think, you know, which understandably, because there is a lot of demonization of anarchy. And, you know, just the idea that, you know, a lot of people, when they hear anarchy, they think it means no rules and that you just do whatever you want to. And that's unfortunately how, a lot of people that I've discovered have approached, you know, where it's just like, oh no, I'm a relationship anarchist. That means like whatever we're doing, I'm going to do whatever I want. And I don't need to tell you or like, you know, you get no say into, and here's the thing, it's one thing not to have a say. It's another thing not to have agency. And I feel like that's where the line is for me, is like, you know, I just want to know what's going on so that I can make choices for myself. I don't, because I'm not going to be like, if I have to tell someone you can't do this, that means that thing would hurt me too much. And I just need to not deal with that person if they want to do that thing. And that's really hard to acknowledge, right? Like, you know, because you can love somebody to the ends of the universe, but if circumstances don't line up, behavior don't line up, like needs don't line up, then it's not going to work, you know. And really being honest about all those things and giving people the chance to make the decisions they need for their own heart is like so important. And I feel like, and interestingly, a good segue into talking about things politically a little bit more, but like, you know, a lot of the time we have things decided for us. And I think even white leftists, everybody, I always say that whatever your politics are, they're aspirational. You are not actually a communist, because we do not have a communist world. What you are is you are a vassal of a dying capitalist empire who is trying to usher in these thoughts, this way of being. And that is what we need desperately. But that ideology is still aspirational. And also you can't use it to forget to obviate the fact that you grew up with the same programming, and that programming might be sneaking in, where it's like, there have to be some sorts of rules and safeguards in any society where there are humans, right? So like, we want to make sure that American individualism isn't being mistaken for a desire for a non-hierarchical world.
Yeah.
Right? Is it that you actually want like freedom for everyone, or do you just not want to be told what to do? You know? But so to actually to like directly steer the conversation to politics, what would you say are, you know, your political leanings? Like, you know, where would you say you fall? And again, not just in terms of like this is the title I have above my name or next to my name, but like, what do you actually think?
Yeah. I mean, I generally just use the word leftist. I don't necessarily like resonate with any particular label. And I think all the labels are flawed. Like you said, it's all aspirational anyway. I typically, I support lifting up whoever has been, push down, like if I were to say it in a nutshell, and that very much includes like, oh, I've got extra, like I'm usually the one giving out extra, and I'm happy to do that. Right. And so just sort of understanding that I want to build interdependence, not, hyper individualism. So, politically, I mean, I'm in Germany now. I'm still acquainting myself with Germany. There's a lot of parallels with the US, but yeah, I think my action in
what's going on with the nails?
Oh, yeah. I actually have to get them redone. They're getting a little long. Yeah, it's my Christmas nails still. Yeah.
Loving the accent nail. I used to do that as well. Sorry,
yeah.
Little ADHD squirrel moment.
All good. So now my work in and around the US is typically like online, trying to get attention for certain causes and drive resources in certain places. But in Germany, it's really like trying to show up physically, because I still don't speak the language great, not enough to actually be on the front lines of arguing about something,
Right.
But yeah, there's like a lot of punks here, a lot of anarchists here. I typically get along with them. I got along with them before I even had words for that. I was like, these are my people. Apparently we agree on the same stuff. So, and I think that is, there's a dailiness to it. And that's where it comes back into your everyday relationships, it's like, it can't all be theory. It cannot all be theory. And there's a lot of us, I'm sure I've been guilty of this, but just like, I'm not above it, I guess I should say. But like, we can't just decide I've flipped a switch, so now this is who I am, because we will fall back on, especially if we're scared or stressed or depleted or whatever, when our guards are down, when our resources are low, we're going to fall back on our old programming. And so to the idea of non-hierarchy and polyamory, and people are like, I want everybody to be equal. And even if they understand the concept of equity versus equality, right? Of like, let's lift up the people who need it more. There will still be this idea that like, I'm non-hierarchical, therefore I'm incapable of hierarchy.
Yes.
And I'm like,
yes,
let's look at that. Because like, it creates, I don't know if you know the term sneakyarchy, but
I've heard it, and I think I giggle too much every time I hear the word. Please give us a description.
I mean, sneakyarchy might be self-explanatory for some people, but it's generally when people say I'm non-hierarchical, and then you're like, I don't know, your words and your actions super aren't matching. And some people even wouldn't mind relating to you. You've just mismanaged their expectations. You said it was one thing and it's actually another,
Yes.
And so I think just having clarity on that, and knowing that we are all capable of old behaviors, we are all capable of harm, then we're actually able to talk about it. It doesn't put me in a good bucket and them in a bad bucket, and then it's like, so I've actually, to the point that I've started using the term anti-hierarchical rather than non-hierarchical. I feel like it's a little bit more active.
No, that's
bit of a semantics thing, but like,
semantics matter. Words matter.
Yeah. And like in that way, it is also expressing this is a goal. This is an intention. I'm not saying I've arrived, because there are asymmetries. I am with some people longer than others. There will be like, I'll have inside jokes. I'll have routines. I'll have some things that with a long-term partner that a new partner might be like, I don't know, I feel left out, or you booked that vacation and didn't ask me how I feel about it. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't, I'm so sorry. We're like, we gotta be willing to catch ourselves in those moments to be like, right, I made a decision that impacted you and I didn't even tell you it was happening. I just announced it was decided.
Yes.
Oh, my bad. I don't want to do that. So let me make it right. And yeah, so people get quite defensive when they hear, hey, you did a thing that made me feel this way, and it doesn't seem to be in line with what you told me. They get defensive because they're like, I'm not a liar. I'm not,
yes.
Like, can we not?
it's so wild. And it's so like, that is so real, because and some of this is Western society, and some of it is whiteness as well, where it is, the way I can explain it best is like, if you're in Congress on like the Senate floor or in like the House of Representatives, it's perfectly legal to pass a law which says Black people aren't allowed to walk down the street. It is not okay in Congress to say to someone, you are a racist. Right?
Yeah.
Calling someone something or like making someone feel like they've been accused of something is worse than whatever it is they're doing. And there's a lot of that in society. And there's a lot of people who like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm not a cheater. I'm not a liar. I'm not a, you know, I'm not a person that has bad intentions. Like I always have good intentions. Okay, but that's not what your actions are. I believe, actually, that who you are deep down within yourself is something much different from and less important than how you show up in the world. Because that is actually that's the living record of who you are as a person. The stuff that you have inside you that you feel is great. Sure. But like if you know, it's like people who are like, I hate everything. I'm such a misanthrope and like, I don't like humans, but like they're very giving, you know, and like they will do, you know, like it's like the kind versus nice thing, right? Like, like in New York, people say all kinds of things about New Yorkers, but I've seen few situations where if something's actually going wrong, that a New Yorker someone will not help you out. They might complain or be like, you know, like, what are you doing, you goofball? What? How'd you fall down these stairs? You know, but like all the time while they're helping you up. And it's like, you know, the things that we do are who end up being who we are. And for some people that seems shallow because it's all about like deep down, but deep down is not your hands. It's your heart. And it's your hands that we get to actually touch in life. And like that, I feel like that really like hit for me when you said, you know, just a person reacting because they're like, this person just said that I'm this, and they haven't seen their actions from outside themselves. So like, I do have compassion for that because like, you know, there is a moment of like, where you are confronted with something that you've done causing harm. And the thing to do with that, which is, again, not a thing that the overculture, the Western overculture wants, is for you to take a criticism, reflect on it, and be like, actually, that's true, and I don't want to do that. It's always like, defend yourself. Like, how dare you say that to me? And it's all tied in. It's tied in politically. It's like, you know, it's like, and that also, I want to draw back a line to the thing that you said about being anti-hierarchical as opposed to non-hierarchical. I feel like there's a wonderful parallel there between being non-racist and being anti-racist, because lots of people say they're not racist. And usually it's right after they've been accused of doing something racist because they did something racist, right? So like you can do something racist and not be a bad person. You just have this education. It's like the first thought you think is your programming. What you actually do about that thought is who you are. That's kind of, that's what I believe, at least.
I agree. I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to your point of like, everyone knows why they did something, but they don't experience themselves from the outside looking in. I'd say the vast majority of harm that I see in polyamory comes from people who are scared, who are just terrified, and they feel like they're the most vulnerable. They have no control. Like their partner's fallen in love and like, yeah, sure, I'm the spouse with institutional like privileges. And yeah, we've been together for long. Like maybe you are vulnerable and you are wielding power over this person they've known for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? And and so both can be true. It's like, I hear you that you're scared. And can you see that like in trying to make the stressor go away, you were trying to like manipulate a situation. You're trying to like make a person do something and bend to your will. And both of those are true, and not that I'm above that. When I've been in complete dire straits afterwards, I, was presented with, hey, this is what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Right. And like, I better get into like bulk up my support network and, work on my self-soothing and not make my fear and anxiety now your pain. So
that's a great, don't let your fear and anxiety become someone else's pain. That, I feel like that is, apply it politically, apply it personally, apply it like in every, wow. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
So now I want to talk, as I always like to end things with, is what are we doing? Oh, no. Oh, no. This is going to be a long segue.
Okay. Whatever. I'm around here.
No. So politically, what do you think are some things that people can and should be doing right now in this moment? Because that's, people are looking for the thing that I just deactivated my Instagram, which was hard. That was very hard to press the delete button. I was like, I have 40,000 people here. This is something that means a lot to me that I've built up, but also my ethos, my spirit is telling me I got to get off this platform. But like, I don't think everybody needs to do the same thing at all. Right. But like, Anyway, what do you feel are some practical strategies? What are you doing? What do you intend to do more of? Give us what do I do? If someone's like, what do I do? What would you say?
Usually I ask, what are you good at? Is my first question, because a lot of times, and I think I felt this way at one point, people will have an idea of what activism is. And they're like, you're in the front lines with a bullhorn, it's like, that can be what it looks like. Yeah. But if that's the only picture you have of it, then maybe you and that doesn't work for you or whatever, then maybe you just do nothing. Like there's an in between,
Yes.
As well, like who are your people, so what are you good at and who are your people? And so for me, like I'm good at communicating in English. I'm very challenged by having the ABCs baby talk in German, and I'm like frustrated. I can't speak. This is all I do is speak.
I know.
So that's humbling. Yeah. But yeah, like, I can help people take their mess of thoughts and be like, is this a more concise way to say it? Okay. So maybe we put that into some messaging, and maybe we put out a video that can help, put it in layman's terms and like take out all the academic and theory language and make it more accessible. So in this way, like, I was like, this is what I have to offer. And I've gone to various different people who are on the ground moving, as well as, different, like grassroots organizations or like mutual aid organizations. Like, what do you need? Here's what I'm good at. And so if you feel motivated by what you're seeing of like California on fire or Palestine or these are not mutually exclusive, like whatever you see that's like really, really disrupting you, locally and broadly, okay, who's doing something about it already? Because people are already doing something about it. Yes. And so you don't got to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. Can you just go there and be like, okay, I'm good at like, I'm good at this. I'm good at that. Do you have a technical skill? I've seen a lot of like engineers saying, okay, I'm going to give you a lesson on data privacy and data security and stuff. I'm like, great. I can't do that, but you can. So we all need everybody's special skill. And I think it can feel a lot more doable and less intimidating to get involved if it doesn't feel like you have to be the front person face of a movement. I think, in fact, like most people aren't, and we need everybody. So in that way, it kind of lowers the barrier of entry. And if something isn't accessible, then something else might be.
Yeah, that's real. That's real. And I would say that in addition to that, I mean, absolutely agreed. And in addition to it not being one or the other, it's never one or the other. It's always both. It's like the bombs being dropped on Palestine are accelerating climate chaos in real time because there's been so many of them. So it's like the idea of separation is nonsensical, right? Like the idea of an individual organism is nonsensical. Even me as one organism is like a collection of, like I have so many different gut flora that I might as well be a plant. There is so much that goes, and that's just looking at it on like a purely biological, but also history, right? I mean, and I'm controversially for some, I believe we spend too much fucking time worrying about our ancestors and not enough about those that will come after us. The people who came before us, they are gone. They did what they did. We can venerate them and whatever, but our duty is not to them. Our duty is to the people in the future. And that's basically my politics in a nutshell. You know what I mean? But also just kind of tying this to like, I am indeed a witch and I'm a practitioner of magic and shit. Like everybody has in them everyone has everything, right? Like speaking astrologically for a second, you can be like, I don't like Scorpios and you're not a Scorpio, but Scorpio falls somewhere in your chart. And that is a way that you approach something. So there is a way that you can access and understand that. And I feel like that's true politically as well. And people are like, no, I'm a conservative. I'm a socialist. Okay, well, there are different ways that you approach things, and it needs to be fluid and it needs to be authentic and genuine to you, right? Because to be like, for example, in terms of like, say, violence, right? Some people are good at fighting. Some people like fighting. Like one of the things that allowed me to get myself into kink when I was initially very, very like resistant and even grossed out by it. And the fact that I was so grossed out by it should have been a clue, but whatever. But I was at a martial arts class and I was like, we come to this place and we wear special outfits and we beat the bejesus out of each other and we call each other sir and ma'am. What is the difference? What is the difference? What is the difference? I don't get it. So like, recontextualizing everything that you're dealing with at a certain time is really important, and looking at it authentically. This is a tangent. Going back to the practical, I think it is important, like you said, to start with what you're good at and what you can bring to the table. And one of the things I say is that for every frontline soldier, there have to be 100, 1,000 people who are not there on the front lines, who have been doing comms work, who have been doing food, who have been, making sure there's food, making sure there's supplies, making sure that there's operational security. And this is another thing, is that like, there is an inherent ableism to the way that we think that, it's all about going to the barricades, picking up a pitchfork and going to the place and dragging the person out. Like that's not what a revolution at this time is going to look like. And there is a place for everybody. And a lot of and it's always been that what needs to be done is going to be done by people with a range of abilities. Right? It's a really specific ability to be a frontline run and gun soldier. Like, and it's like, I'm like, babe, if you haven't been spending the past 5-10 years of your life learning weapons, learning martial arts, learning all this stuff, you're not going to start now, honey. That's not going to be your job. What are you good at? What are you actually going to do? Are you good at feeding people? Great. Do that. Are you good at running numbers? Great. You can keep track of how many bags of rice there are. That is vital, right? An army marches on its stomach. We can't do anything without food. There need to be more people producing food than producing weapons, and even more people who are doing those things than that need to actually be fighting, because that's actual physical conflict is essentially the measure of least resort for organisms in general, right? And also like that's and like the reason that the police are so over militarized is because That's their plan for dealing with the people. That's their only plan. Their plan isn't to give us any more of anything. Their plan isn't to respond to our needs. That's why I say again, I understand why people hate it when I say this, but the era of marching down the street with signs is over. They have proven they don't give a shit. They don't care. And so what is that doing? You're dissipating your energy. You're mobilizing. You're not organizing. It's a really great talk by Kwame Ture, who was like, Malcolm X was a great organizer. Martin Luther King was a great mobilizer. Like Martin Luther King could get thousands of people to a march. And sometimes that had effect, right? But like Malcolm X was building mosques, was building like institutions. The reason that the Black Panthers, to my thinking, are the most successful revolutionary group in American history, perhaps in history, period, because people forget that they were only around functionally for like 4 or 5 years. Really? I didn't know that. They started in the late 60s, and by the late 60s, they were public enemy number one. This was before the internet. This was without, right? And why? Because they did the thing that we need to be doing now, which is you pool resources from people, you find the way to allocate them without the need for a state, right? For the state that exists. What you're doing is you're building parallel systems. And I feel like that's the thing that we all need to be doing right now. We're not looking to, I don't need to destroy the American empire. That's going to happen by itself. Empires destroy themselves, right? And the problem is that if there's nothing left behind, you get a dark ages. But if you have parallel systems that are built, that's where we get to what we actually want. The actual goal, the actual dream of being able to live and provide for each other. That's what we want. And that starts just by building. And like you said, it starts with knowing what you're good at, just doing that and plugging in to people who know where to, another great thing that is important is the ability to literally organize humans. And I think that is the thing about organizing that people forget is it's just like organizing. If you have 5 people, organizing would be like, okay, Mary's really good at, Mary's got lots of money, John's really strong. It's like a D&D party. It really is. It's just that's what organizing is being like, what is your character class? What are your abilities? What's your level? And then when we see a problem, we know how to approach that problem. And I feel like that's kind of the stage we're at now. And to segue into another thing that is part of this discussion, I have been building for content creators their own Discord servers, because I feel like content creators are, at the way that it exists now, so new, like historically so new, like literally since 2020. Like that's when it really, because yes, there were influencers, but that was a different thing. Right. And there are like famous people who have millions of followers, but that was a different thing because that fame, that notoriety came from systems that already exist. But the current era of content creation and people who have 10, 100,000, millions of followers now, who are just essentially grassroots, that's brand new. So we have built in a giant base of people that we can organize. And I believe strongly I think that's one of our like duties right now. How do you think you are going to help meet this moment? What are you personally going to do?
Big question. I mean,
I like to go.
I'm really interested in the Discord server concept for being someone who has like people listening to her. I've got my little corner of the internet, not to downplay it. People tell me I downplay it too much. I gotta catch myself.
It's awesome.
But just to like, to respect, like, okay, I could mobilize people. And also to what are we imagining? What are we doing next? So friend of mine is an organizer, and she has only lived in Berlin for like a short amount of time. She's from Ethiopia, fled genocide there, and she would get people together to have us imagine what's next. And we would like literally cut out, like do collages and do improv and do things that we were together. We were thinking, what are we building? What's next? What's going to be in the future that we are doing? You know, and I really benefit from that when I participate in it, you know, because like how can we build if we're, you know, if we're not sure what it is that we're going towards, you know? So yeah, I think there's a lot of, in terms of my role, I want to continue stretching myself to imagine what's possible, to not be complacent. And I want to keep using my strengths, which is like, I have a degree in, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in short format storytelling. Like, so when content creation came around, I was like, I'm kind of suited for this.
Yeah.
So, you know, being able to take something that might feel overwhelming or complex and make it a bit more bite-sized is something that I hope to continue to be able to do, to continue to make ideas that are leftist not have necessarily the jargon and just be relatable. I mean, Bernie Sanders got applauded on Fox News panel, right? Like on open, because he was just saying things and people were like, yes, that, you know? And I'm like, okay, so if we take out some of these trigger words for people, you know, and beyond that, I think also like I want ideas to be accessible. I'm trying to use more like mono and double syllable words because it's just a little bit easier to take in when we're taking in content streams constantly, but also reading comprehension is lower. And so I want everybody to be able to access it. So that's my focus right now, is continuing to be in conversations with people that are imagining what's next and contributing my ideas for that, including chatting with you. And also seeing how can I synthesize this and then get people talking about it, get people questioning about it. Because they don't have to be in community with me. But if they take that question home and they chew on it and then they take it to the people that are in their life, like that's where I've seen the most, return on my efforts. And I feel optimistic because like, I really love the possibilities of that. So in terms of how I'm coming, but there is more to be done with the rise of the far right in Germany. I'm hoping to stay here. I'm hoping to eventually get citizenship. And so I'm also materially, the maintenance of it is I want to learn this language and I want to be able to fight in like the original Nazis who never left type of deal. Like that I want to be boots on the ground here too, which means working on my skill set.
Say less. I know what you're saying. Yes. Yes. Because I'll just say that those OG Nazis were very well supported by the United States. You know, it was like, in fact, there's a great book called Hitler's American Model, which it's kind of like, there are some things where even Hitler was like, oh, that's, you know what, that one's too much even for me.
Really?
The way that we treated the Native Americans and and Black folks is kind of like, it certainly was a blueprint, but it was also in some ways a bridge too far, even for the freaking Nazis, because America, I believe that America is the most evil, most dangerous, and most cruel empire the world has ever seen. And I don't think it's even close. Even the people we took the mantle from, even the UK, did not do as much damage. And a lot of that is not just, and some of that is also just like, a function of time and technology. Because like it's not possible for the Roman Empire to have done as much damage to the planet as it is for us to, because we have the tools to do that, because we have planes zipping around everywhere all the time, and because we have literal weapons where you drop one weapon and it can affect the entire ecosystem of the world. Like that, you know, that kind of power is, and that's where we are. Right. And it's like we're seeing it right now in such clear and sharp relief. And the things that we have ignored are rebounding back on us. And like one would think that, you know, well, you know what? Los Angeles being, and I've seen some horrifying takes from leftists on this, where it's kind of like they're kind of like psyched about it in an accelerationist way, and I'm like, no. Like I understand where, like, okay, I do understand what you're getting at, because I do believe that like you have to heighten the contradictions and you have to show people in a way that they can't ignore. But you can do that with words. You can do that with lots of other ways. You don't need to burn down or revel in the burning down of all these houses, because that also is just accelerating climate change, right? It's not just that the houses are burning down, or that like an entire cultural history of this country is being lost. It's that the problem is compounding itself as we speak, and we need to stop it at all costs. That's the job, is to stop it. It's to halt it, because it is accelerating. You don't need to be an accelerationist, because that's what capitalism does. Capitalism has the same growth model as the cancer cell, and that means continued exponential growth until there's nothing left to eat. And that's where we are, right? And it's like, now that it is touching certain people, unfortunately, some people don't seem to see things until it affects them because of Western individualism, like partially, right? But then conversely, you know, thinking too much about family and family structure is, unfortunately, again, hate me, but hear me, when people are focused too much on family as it is defined by a patriarchal world, what you're doing is you're fighting for some man that's been dead for 100, 200, 1,000 years. It's never going to work. Right? So the family unit is important, but the family unit, the nuclear family unit, the family that is determined and defined by the lineage of men for thousands of years, that's not the future. There's no way that's going to bring the future, right? People who are like, no, just talk to your family. How does that work for you now? Right? Blood is a really, really poor measure of simpatico, of interest, of like what, you know, of where you are and what you want to see done in the world. It's actually, for a lot of people, the final boss. It's a trap. It's where people most often abandon themselves. It's and even in monogamous relationships, to bring it back to that, monogamy is the main driver of patriarchy, because when you have, it's like, oh no, you're a couple and that's it. You have your kids, you are a unit. We understand this unit. And it is a unit, unfortunately, that is a, like, you know, the next package unit of this line of Smiths that has been happening for years, that has this generational wealth or does not, or the worst, right? Like people who are Black, whose last name is Johnson or Brown or Green, where it's like, oh, that's still some white dude's lineage that you're tracking, right? Which is, it's the future is where we got to start thinking, and we got to start building our families right now. We have like this. I think the coolest thing about this moment, and about the internet, and about the past 5 years, and about content creators, is that we are collecting people based on values. And that has never been the way the world has been put together. The overculture does not want things put together on that unless they're values like the 10 Commandments or something. Which,
Sure.
don't get me wrong, the 10 Commandments kind of go hard in some of the real basic stuff, okay, don't kill people, don't lie about people, don't steal things from people. Great. Sure. Right. But the way that the big three, the Abrahamic religions, have taken control of everything, and that ties right into capitalism and to patriarchy and to obviously homophobia and unfortunately racism, because all of that comes from that. I think one of the biggest things and one of the reasons that our job as connecting people is so important is because we are helping people to redefine family and community and values. And I feel like that's the biggest missing piece right now. Like, that's why people don't know what to do and are saying things like, oh, just go meet your neighbors. Okay, well, what if you're Black and you happened to be in the suburbs because your parents bought a house there years ago, but everybody around you is Trump flag people and they hate Black people? Well, you're just gonna go knock on those doors? 50% of the people in this country, in America, live in suburbs. Suburbs are intentionally designed to have no community, to build no community, to essentially be places to warehouse the workforce of the country. So, like, what do you mean you're going to build community there? How? It's a really, I think, important and we have a window into people's hearts, into their homes, into their lives. And we get to talk to them when they're like half asleep in bed and like actually receptive to ideas. And it doesn't have to be in person, where there is, first of all, are you a good orator? Are you can you connect with people? Do you have good empathy? Like, if you don't, in person is going to be more difficult for you. Like, I'm a little hot-headed. So I'm very good at except with dogs. Strangely enough. Anyway, but like I'm not a person, you don't want me at a protest or at something like that, because if I see the wrong thing, I'm going to react in a way that is in the end probably not good. Right. I know that about myself. And that is that's another thing. We got to actually know ourselves, and I feel like, Anyway, okay. I was just rambling a little bit.
No, I mean, I think so you're talking about the nuclear family, and it is very much intentionally on purpose, nuclear family as a default, nuclear family as the only option, husband, wife, 2.5 kids, patriarchal, heteronormative and all of that.
Yeah.
If that happens to align with what an individual organically wants, beautiful, right? And sometimes people will be like, oh, you're against what I have in my life. I'm like, baby, no, I'm against the norms. I'm against the norm. If you're happy, I love that for you. It's very lucky that what you happen to want is what everybody tells you should want. However, it's just when there's no other options provided, why? Why is it that Native American, different kinds of polygamy and different kinds of communal relating and child rearing and stuff was made to be illegal? Why was there institutional squashing of other kinds of families, so it goes beyond pop culture and media, though that very much plays a huge role in the mythology of the nuclear family and the romanticizing of, having a one and only, your other half, all of these ideas of this is what love looks like. That plays a big part into it, but there's a more nefarious, consciously on purpose, this is what the messaging should be, and we should kill all other messaging of other kinds of families. If you listen to Ben Shapiro, he says it on purpose. If you listen to Charlie Kirk, unfortunately, he says it on purpose. He's we are fighting to protect the nuclear family. They're not even saying family values anymore as a default all the time or as a euphemism. They're saying we want the nuclear family. People are trying to challenge the nuclear family model, and really because it's an extension of American individualism. I can only speak to the US, but if you like see yourself and your family as separate from everybody else, and you're just looking out for you, and you're just looking out for you and your kids and your spouse, then that like will satisfy, I guess, the desire for people around you to the extent that it still functions to not have you talking to your coworkers, not having you talk to people who might disagree with you on some stuff. Like, it's just isolates you a bit more.
Yeah.
And it also absolutely serves capital, because if they can sell a washer dryer to 20 different homes rather than having a laundromat in the center of the cul-de-sac, you know what I mean? Then all of that plays into it, and it's very much on purpose. And again, like, want what you want, live how you want to live, and really think about, like, why is this the only story I was ever told, and who does that serve? Who benefits from that? So I really am a big fan of trying to imagine, like, well, what if we did share more? Like, do I actually have to buy a sewing machine, or do I know anybody who has a sewing machine? Yeah. Can I just ask around? Like, on the tiny level, starting to, if it's not your immediate in-person neighbors, like you said, it's not always safe. Outside of Berlin's a little oasis inside a lot of, messy people. A lot of AFD flags. And side note, U.S. Confederate flags. Their old flag here was made to be illegal, so they started flying U.S. Confederate flags. It's very weird to go into a hard German bar and see, like, wait, am I back in Georgia? Where am I? Weird. So that's a side note. But yeah, if it's not physically safe to find your people locally, like, still to branch out and start to meet people. And I think, like, having variety of the types of people helps at, like, different ages, different genders, different like people who might be awkward or uncomfortable or a little bit brash, or because sometimes we can, with the luxury of meeting like-minded people, be like only talking to like-minded people. Yeah. And then it's going to be harder to unionize if you can't talk to the other factory worker who's like a little gruff around the edges and might have made a fucked up joke. It's like, okay, but can you still talk to them about what you're making though?
Yes.
So yeah, to be willing to tolerate social discomfort, within, obviously being safe. And in doing that, we can really just be like imagining something doable, because we're all going to need each other, So I guess maybe that's more of a message about class solidarity, but like absolutely imagining the family to extending beyond just your spouse. Friends, their friends, the old lady who lives down the hall, like, we can be looking out for each other in a very material way. So
that's amazing. Yes, that's I just wanted to also, it's just as weird for me with the flag thing that you said with the Confederate flags in Germany. It's no weirder to me than seeing Confederate flags in California or like Oregon. It's like
yeah.
Also, I have shoes that lasted longer than the Confederacy. Obviously, it's just about, I couldn't possibly be about heritage because the Confederacy only lasted for 4 years, right? It's like, it's the silliest
clearly
dodge.
A symbol, and the people who everybody agreed was the bad guys, they know what the symbol means. So can we drop the act?
Truly.
Like, yeah.
Oh, actually, this is a little segue to a spicy question, which is, actually, wait, first, before you say that, I just wanted to say that the thing you said about, like, all the stuff you said about the nuclear family and about the way that it is intentional for people who are pushing that, like the Steve Bannons of the world. They really are, like, they believe that white Western society is at a point where it has to go to war with the rest of the world to subjugate it. That's what they're doing. That's like, it's like whatever you think they're doing, they said it. They said what they're actually doing, right? Like, so, that brings me to the question that I was going to say, which is, giving people the benefit of the doubt is super important, right? Where do you find the line comes in? Whether we're talking about relationally with somebody who's, when is someone being careless and when is somebody being shitty? How do you know? You know, and like when it comes to, you know, or politically, right? When is someone, how do you know when it's someone that just doesn't know or is giving people the benefit of the doubt and when they're actually just hiding what they really think? You know, like what, and those are two, they're separate, but they're sort of a related skill. The skill of discernment, I guess, is what we're talking about. But I guess let's start with relationally, you know, are there things that are automatic deal breakers? You know, are there things that, or is it totally situational? Yeah. Whatever you have to say about that.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on what it is we're talking about, but like it broadly, you know, how do you know when someone messed up versus when they're not safe to be around? You know, I just look at what they do next, right? Hey, I've told you, you did a thing. Even if you have moments of being defensive or being reactive, I get it, you're a person. What do you do next, you know, to make sure it doesn't keep happening? Because if it keeps happening, then it doesn't matter how nice and, you know, like progressive sounding your response was, how eloquent you were and how you understand how I feel. If you do it again, well, now you're creating a pattern, right? And so I just want to know, like, what do people do? And even if they do it again in a different way, but it's smaller and you can tell that they tried to listen, like you can see materially, are people taking it seriously? Do they actually want to be different and avoid hurting you? Or are they like, you know, at the very least, like performing that intention and like, so that they get away with it, you know? I just take a look at that. I offer a lot of grace for people, but I also watch patterns of behavior. And I take a look at escalations, you know, in either direction. I'm like, okay, you know, you lashed out at me again and snapped and raised your voice, but you stopped yourself in the middle of it and said, I'm sorry, I'm doing it. You know? Okay. That's progress. We need progress, not perfection. I get it, you know? But I'm seeing that you're taking it seriously versus doing it and then saying, well, you know, I'm growing and give me time. And, you know, is it context that you're giving or is it an excuse, you know? So I think that's really determined by what they do next and what their patterns of behavior are. And I think that can go to scale as well. You know,
I think that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Like, because again, like we were talking about earlier, what really is going to tell the story is what a person does. Like not what they say about it. And it's hard sometimes because, you know, we do want to give people the benefit of that, especially people that we love and that we care about and that we have like put a lot into, you know, but there definitely has, and honestly, I see this more with family even than with relationships, you know, when it comes to like, because their family is the excuse I see most often for people completely abandoning everything they supposedly believe in, you know, where it's just like, you know, and being humored once or twice a year by families who hate everything they stand for, who are ridiculing them all the time in private or to their faces most of the time, you know, but then one time racist Uncle Jim says something that like shows a little bit of class consciousness. You're like, see, we're getting somewhere. And it's like, no, you're getting got. And what happens is this is the main way that white people get folded back into white supremacy because you can be a diehard communist who fights, who organizes, who does everything. But then when you go back for the holidays and sits with your family, even if you are pushing back on some of their ideas once a year, you're still white. It's still white supremacy. Sorry. Because you're not actually changing any of their actions in the world. And one of your actions in the world is because of how you feel about a patriarchal notion of family that was handed down to you. well, what you're doing is you're breaking bread with racists. It's like that saying, you know, like if you have a Nazi sitting at a nice dinner with 10 people, you have 11 Nazis. That's what it is. Most of the people who were Nazis were not the soldiers. They were the people of Nazi Germany. They were people who would never have a hit or kicked or beaten someone, who many of whom thought that it was too much, you know, or that, but what did they do about it? Nothing.
Yeah, I can't remember where I heard it, but it was sort of like, you know, the like right wingers are the ones who would report you, and out of anger, liberals are the ones who would report you and feel really bad about it, you know, right, and like totally. And go cry at night, you know. It's totally. Like, okay, you know, like to this question, yeah, like to this question of like, when is it just a deal breaker? You know, there are bars in Berlin that if anybody walks in wearing something that suggests that they're a far right person, out immediately, out by violence if needed, right? Because like, yeah, they're like in a punk anarchist place, like come as you are, accept that. And
yes,
I heard the
paradox of tolerance.
Exactly. I heard a bartender explain it once. He's like, well, yeah, if he comes and he's sitting and he's not hurting anybody, okay, now he thinks it's okay and comfortable for him to come and sit.
Yes.
And then maybe his friend comes next week. And then after a few weeks, you've got a Nazi bar. You know what I mean? And so yes, just like cutting it off instantly. I will say though, when it comes to your blood family, one thing that I can speak to that I don't hear talked about enough is you might have to walk away from some comforts and money and like it's there are real costs. And I'm talking to, you know, other white people from suburbia that's who I can speak to. But like there are real costs to really standing on your values. I mean, the benefits are you're going to like yourself a lot because you know deep down that you are consistent. On business.
Hell yeah.
You know, and you're going to attract awesome people, you know, because they're going to see that. So that's the benefit, you know. The drawback is people who have access to recommend you for jobs, to put you in their will, to subsidize your rent, like obviously, if it's for survival and you can't talk back to your dad now because he's paying your rent and whatever, like I get it, you know, have a strategy and maybe a path out, but like be willing, be ready to walk away from that. And a lot of people are like, oh, never mind then, you know?
Yes. Oh, that's like, so important. That's so important.
Okay. Then at least don't lie to yourselves. Don't lie to me, you know, because like that's really when the rubber hits the road, you know, and like it's how I can tell, like unless you've got people in power who are uncomfortable with you, who are annoyed by you, who are angry at you, then I'm wondering what it is that you're doing that isn't pissing them off. Like, it's not that we have to go and be antagonistic to everybody outwardly. Me just existing in some of these rooms, like I was even invited to be on the board of different apps and to be like the lefty woman, queer woman. I was the diversity hire. That like I was invited to places that had decision-making power. And then I would be like, oh, well, have you considered this angle, that angle, that angle? Hey, what you said, like, that's kind of fucked up, you know? And I would be me. And then I would stop getting invited to meetings. And then I was quietly asked to leave. And then, you know, and so unfortunately that risk is involved. And so while I understand, and I don't say it lightly, I also have practiced what I preach, right? And like in breaking some relationships, I got written out of wills. Like I materially was like, all right, I really gotta lean on my people because that safety net, which whatever is not going to be there.
Golden handcuffs.
Right? Because then I couldn't. I literally couldn't because I was bulimic in that environment. My body, even when I stopped forcing myself to throw up, like in my recovery process, my body started throwing up. I got sick being around it. And I was like, I'm not going to be alive if I stay here. So I don't know. Maybe I'm lucky that the stakes got kind of high for me. I left home and I joined a cult accidentally. So like I had my whole trajectory of like having to again lose everyone and everything by leaving the cult, you know? And so like I think rebuilding in that way. I've got a perspective of like, I come from privilege and I know what it is to walk away from it. I don't say it lightly, you know? And it's not that I've walked away from all my privileges. It's just like, you can do it.
And some you can't, you know, but the ones you have, that you are literally modeling what I think is the most important thing right now for white people. I applaud you for it because what you said that's totally true. That's where the rubber meets the road. What are you willing to give up? You know, and yes, there is the survival aspect of it, but also I would say to add to that, what are you being made to give up for what you're getting? Because like, if you can still be in sort of distant relation with these people, but like, you don't have to, they can't make you like shut up or not talk about particular things or like, you know what I mean? If you can actually fully be yourself and still get the privileges and benefits, great, do it. You know, if you absolutely need to, yes, I understand, especially because shit is really hard. And that's one of the reasons that they tie so much to generational wealth is because that's part of the trap. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yes, people are like, it's so hard to do X, Y, Z. That's on purpose, baby. Like literally, right? Yeah. And I mean, I can also say that, I mean, I appreciate somebody who stands on business. I'm not going to out your astrology chart, but your rising sign. Remind me to tell you something about your rising sign based on something you just told me. Because I was like, oh my goodness, astrology is... Anyway, yeah, like, I mean, you know, as a Black person, we have, you know, the Black-white wealth gap is the worst it's actually ever been. To this, like right now. And I have access to some like limited generational stuff. But I'm like, no, because my family's really conservative. Because Black people are also Americans. Black Americans are Americans. That's why we're having a big fucking argument right now about whether or not a billionaire artist like on a horse with an American flag is a good thing or not. It's like, okay. Don't get me started. Though I do appreciate how much white people are staying out of this conversation because it's definitely a bunch of family conversation. But anyway, but yes, Black people are also Americans, right? And it's like when people are like, oh, I can only organize with Black people. I'm like, okay, so you call up Clarence Thomas and Candace Owens and have a great time organizing with them. You call up, you know, your uncle, who is like the most religious person you've ever met in your life, who believes that the role of a woman is to submit to a man. Go ahead. See how that's going to do for you in getting Black people to freedom, because all of the things are always connected. There is no separation, right? Like, it's not the other thing that drives me up the wall is especially white leftists who are class reductionists, who are like, we don't need to worry about the identity stuff because it's the class thing that's important. And I'm like, how do you think they organize the class war? They organize it based on identity. It's like, you're so close. It's like, yes, if the one monster has 5 heads and you're immune to the one head, that's the one you attack. You know, you don't wait for somebody else you don't wait for somebody who's allergic to poison to attack the poison head. You know, like I can't stop white supremacy. Like I couldn't. People who look like me cannot, because it is not our problem. We did not create it, so we cannot end it. Right? Even getting self-determination for people of color is only possible with white accomplices, because y'all are the ones in the rooms that can actually dismantle the shit, right? We can we can show you how. We can show you how to make $1 out of 15 cents because that's what we have to do. We can show you how to do community in ways that y'all don't know because we've had to. But in the end, without massive buy-in by white folks, white supremacy is going to continue to white capitalist heteropatriarchal supremacy is going to continue to steamroll the planet, you know? And the number one thing that family unit, which is one of the reasons I think that connecting politics and polyamory is so important, because there you have it. You know, the nuclear family, as we talked about, it's the final boss. And being able to look at relationships and the people in your lives as important in so many different ways, and giving them the honor and the love and the respect in ways that are equitable, not even, for them in your life, and being honest and being direct, politically, personally, that's the only way forward. You know, that's the route to the world we need is authenticity and connection. Whether we're talking about like who you love and or are fucking, or who you're organizing with and how, to me. So
yeah. To add to that, you know, I think it is an extension of, you know, the nuclear family being on purpose, benefiting, you know, the powers that be. I think even if you don't have generational wealth, that isolation can keep you stuck to blood family. I hear that a lot of like, well, but who's going to take care of me? Or people even seek that out. That was some of the most common in my early years of polyamory. Well, what's going to happen when you grow old? Who's going to take care of you when you're older? Like it's tied to like a safety net of care. And so building something different, even if you're not polyamorous, so polyamory can be a way that we bring people close simultaneously. I think even just letting go of the mindset that this is all I can rely on. And I think white people struggle with that maybe a little more. I don't know. But it's something that absolutely we can let go of, even if you only want one romantic or sexual partner. We can take care of each other. Like, who's going to take care of me? Like a dozen different people. I don't want kids. You know, I'm not having a child just to have security that they'll take care of me when I'm elderly. Like,
that's weird.
No, you know, so who's going to take care of me? Like the kids of my friends too. Well, you know, and so, but I think that also requires active commitment to each other, you know, rather than just like, oh, I can coast and I know that my blood family will always show up. I don't have to talk to them often or give to them or whatever. It's like, okay, well then like that feels very cynical to me. So it does take a little bit more effort to actively build your chosen family. And that is our like safety net in so many ways as well. If and when you get sick or need support. Yeah. So this was
it's real. And as good a place as any to stop for now. But
sure.
Thank you so much for all of your content in the past and for this conversation in particular. I really appreciate your perspective, and you know, you are indeed a good communicator. So, you know, that is going to help, I think, a lot of people understand a lot more of these concepts. And it's a time where, you know, us getting together and just like with the server stuff, you know, like finding ways to use the abilities that we have or have been given, and the things that we have built as well, you know, being like, oh, wait, okay, well, I find myself with this. What can I do with this right now? You know, and now that we need something, I've got this, what can we do with this? And approaching everything with that kind of like mindset, that sort of openness, and curiosity, I think is the only way we're going to get out of any of this. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, sure. Well, Chill Polyamory, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I have 2 channels on YouTube. One is media analysis, where I give examples of non-monogamy that are fictional. So if I want to criticize them, I'm not criticizing real people. And then my second channel is Chill Polyamory 2, TOO. And that's where I have like archives of live chats. And that's where podcast episodes go. So if you want longer format, more educational, it's there. And then I have patreon.com/chillpolyamory, and that is where I offer, resources, pen pals, peer support. If you want more of a direct connection, I put my private stories there behind a paywall because it feels a little more secure to not have it be public. And if you would just like a one-off chat, chillpolyamory.com is where my calendar is.
Okay, awesome. So everyone should absolutely connect with Evie because she's great, and connect with your people. Yeah. Do values-based connections. That's the only way forward, right? Any connection that is based on religion, on family, on even just location. These are things that are built on an extremely shifting sand. They are built on something that has nothing to do with you or what you actually believe or who you want to be in the world. And so building on those things is going to be inherently flawed. And even though we might have the love for the world, we don't have the time. So whatever you're doing, do more of it. And know that there are people out there who have already started. Like Evie said, you don't have to start from scratch. There's already somebody who has begun that work. All you got to do is step up and ask, what can I do and how can I help? And that can be online. That can be, if you can find it, in meet space, do that. But however you can do it, do it. And whatever you're doing, if you are actually putting in the work with love, with revolutionary optimism, not just idle hope, you're going to be part of what helps us win, because we're going to win this time. That's our job. We're going to win this time. Thank you all for being here. And thank you to you again, Evie. And we will talk to you again soon.
Nice.